Lieutenant Marco Ruiz had the bad luck to be interesting. On Outpost Kaladesh, a trading hub carved into the iron-rich cliffs of an asteroid, most humans were treated with polite disinterest by the more advanced species. Ruiz, however, had a gift for noticing things others ignored. Tiny gaps in protocols, quirks of alien etiquette, the faint humor in a gesture. He laughed easily, spoke too loudly, and had the audacity to call a four-tentacled dockworker buddy. It made him unforgettable. It also made him the perfect target. So when the Zerati Syndicate decided it needed leverage over humanity, they didn't abduct a diplomat or a general. They took Ruiz, one bright, inconvenient lieutenant, dragged him from the outpost cantina in full view of dozens of witnesses, shackled him before he could crack a final joke, vanished into the void, leaving only the echo of outrage. The Syndicate expected Earth to hesitate, to bargain, to retreat into meekness. After all, humanity was barely 3 centuries into interstellar flight, a young species trying to prove it belonged among the stars. Surely they wouldn't risk a war for a single officer. They were wrong. The emergency council on Earth lasted less than 3 hours. That alone was unprecedented. Governments rarely agreed on the time of day, much less unified action. But Ruiz's abduction ignited something raw, something simple, the principle that no human would be left behind. Captain Alia Morgan was summoned the same evening. The council chamber in Geneva buzzed with tension and too much caffeine. Screens lit her face as she stood before the assembled leaders, her posture as straight as a drawn blade. "You're asking me to command this," she said, eyebrows lifting as schematics flooded the display. A patchwork fleet of military frigates, mining barges with cannons welded on, exploration cruisers stripped for speed, even a few passenger liners fitted with launch tubes. "This is not a formal navy," admitted Admiral Ewan, fingers steepled. "It is everyone who volunteered." Volunteered was putting it lightly. Corporations donated freighters. Colonies offered haulers. Retired captains pulled old ships out of museums. The sheer audacity of it gave Morgan pause. "An armada," she murmured. "Built in days." "Built in outrage," the Admiral corrected. "The Syndicate believes we won't fight for one man. Prove them wrong." Morgan saluted. "We'll bring him home." She chose her bridge crew carefully. If the fleet was a mad gamble, she needed people who could turn madness into order. Dr. Kieran Das arrived first, an engineer whose hair perpetually stuck out as if he'd lost an argument with static electricity. He carried 3 toolkits and a pouch of sunflower seeds, cracking them open with the precision of a metronome. "They gave me a fleet full of junkers," he said by way of introduction, spitting a shell into a paper cup. "But junkers can be beautiful if you love them hard enough. And I do." Then came Eli Park, a diplomatic officer with a background in literature. He looked hopelessly out of place among soldiers, slim and soft-spoken, but his eyes carried a brightness Morgan valued. "We can't win this with weapons alone," Eli said. "Someone has to speak for us, to remind the galaxy who we are, that we fight for people, not for power." Morgan hid her smile. Dreamers often prove the most dangerous in the right moment. Last through the door was Sergeant Brick Kowalski. His real name was Merrick, but no one had called him that since his first deployment. He was broad, loud, and had the unnerving habit of cracking jokes in situations where everyone else expected silence. "So," Kowalski said, dropping a duffel bag that looked like it contained enough explosives to start a small war, "we're going to punch the Syndicate in the teeth because they mess with one guy? I love it. Count me in." Morgan folded her arms. "This isn't about revenge. It's about principle." Kowalski grinned. "Principles are just revenge with better PR." Word of the fleet spread like wildfire. Alien observers scoffed at the endeavor. "The humans are absurd," declared a Dverian strategist on a widely broadcast forum. "They are sending freighters to war. Pleasure ships armed with missiles. This is not strategy. This is desperation." But Morgan saw it differently. The absurdity was the strategy. Where other species waged war with doctrine and precision, humans improvised. They stapled weapons onto transports, rewired reactors with scavenged parts, used holographic projectors meant for theater performances to mimic capital ships. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't clean, but it worked because no one could predict what humans would try next. And at the heart of it all was Ruiz, not because of his rank or value to intelligence, but because he was theirs. The fleet assembled in orbit around Luna. Over 100 ships, each a reflection of humanity's stubborn refusal to give up. Some gleamed with polished armor. Others bore rust and mismatched panels. Together they looked less like an armada and more like a junkyard given engines. But as the ships aligned, engines flaring in unison, something stirred in Morgan's chest. This wasn't desperation. It was defiance. On the flagship Resolute, the crew gathered for departure. Dr. Das fiddled with the power conduits. Eli paced, rehearsing speeches. Kowalski tested his rifles, humming an old Earth tune. Morgan stood at the viewport, watching the blue curve of Earth slip behind them. All this for one man. Eli said softly, almost to himself. Morgan answered without looking away. All this because we're human, and because the galaxy needs to remember what that means. The fleet surged forward, engines igniting like a constellation of fire. Somewhere in the dark, Ruiz sat in a cold cell, bruised but unbroken. The guards mocked him, told him Earth would never come. He laughed, leaning back against the wall. "You don't know humans," he said. "You think I'm alone. But you've just given them a reason to get creative." He pictured Morgan, Das, Eli, Kowalski, faces he trusted though he couldn't see them. He pictured Earth itself rising in anger. "They'll come," Ruiz promised, "and you're going to wish you'd taken anyone else." The fleet's first week in transit was chaos. Ships built for mining stumbled through military maneuvers. Passenger liners lurched out of formation whenever their overworked engines misfired. A few freighters failed to sync their NAV computers, nearly colliding until Dr. Kieran Das patched the system with what looked suspiciously like a gaming console from the 21st century. "Never underestimate the processing power of nostalgia," he muttered, slapping the plastic case as lights stabilized across the bridge. A string of arcade bleeps echoed through the comm system before cutting out. Captain Alia Morgan watched it all with practiced calm. To others, the fleet was a tangle of mismatched ships on the brink of collapse. To her, it was a living organism, messy, awkward, but alive. She had led disciplined squadrons before. This was different. This was humanity at its most unrefined and most dangerous. She trusted it. Eli Park spent his days moving between ships, delivering broadcasts to the fleet. His speeches blended strategy with poetry, reminders of why they sailed into the void. "This is not a war of conquest," he told the crews of the freighters Dawn and Stalwart, voices crackling over imperfect comms. "We fight because one of ours was stolen. We fight because if a single life is disposable, then all of us are. And I promise you this, our story will be remembered." Kowalski, overhearing the speech, rolled his eyes and leaned against the bulkhead. Great. The poet's trying to inspire miners with metaphors. Next he'll be teaching them interpretive dance. Yet, later that night, Morgan overheard the freighter crews repeating Eli's words, almost like a mantra. Even the most cynical hearts needed fuel, and Eli had plenty to give. The galaxy, however, laughed. Reports filtered back from listening posts. Alien strategists openly mocking the scrap fleet. Holovids replayed clumsy maneuvers and fuel mishaps, overlaying them with comedic music. Commentators speculated the humans would turn back before reaching Syndicate space. "They don't understand us," Morgan said at the command briefing. Das cracked another sunflower seed. "If they did, they'd be terrified." "Terrified of what?" Eli asked. "Of the fact that we're making this up as we go," Das replied cheerfully. "And somehow it'll work." The first test came in the Veil Nebula, a maze of ionized clouds and pirate nests. Syndicate patrols prowled here, their sleek cruisers cutting through the mist like knives. Morgan's fleet was spotted within hours. They could have turned and run. They could have hidden and hoped. Instead, they improvised. Dr. Das jury-rigged the entertainment projectors from the liner Aurora into massive decoys, phantom dreadnoughts shimmering in the nebula. Morgan ordered cargo haulers to break apart asteroid debris and scatter it, disguising themselves as drifting rock clusters. Kowalski, grinning like a madman, volunteered for the riskiest role. He flew a beat-up gunship straight toward the Syndicate patrol, comms wide open, blasting ancient rock music into the void. "Come and get me, you spineless jellyfish," he bellowed, dodging plasma fire with improbable luck. His gunship belched smoke from 3 directions, but he kept it dancing like a drunk fighter pilot. The Syndicate cruisers pursued the decoy, allowing the rest of the fleet to slip by undercover shadows and phantom warships. By the time the enemy realized they'd been tricked, Kowalski had ejected, leaving his burning gunship to collide spectacularly with one of their engines. He drifted back in a pod, humming the same tune as the fleet cheered. "Completely insane," Morgan muttered, but her lips curved into the faintest smile. Morale soared. The ragtag crews began to believe that absurdity was strength. They sang across comm channels, swapped jokes about duct tape holding the Armada together, and wagered on how long before Kowalski blew himself up. Eli recorded everything, shaping it into a chronicle. "One day," he told Morgan, "children will learn about the fleet that fought with spare parts and stubbornness. They'll laugh, but they'll also understand." Morgan didn't answer. She simply looked at the star map, where the Syndicate stronghold loomed closer each day. But danger was never far. In the nebula's outer rim, a Syndicate frigate cornered one of the slower freighters, the Matador. Its engine sputtered, and its shields were decades out of date. The frigate demanded surrender, promising to return the crew to Earth unharmed. The freighter captain, an old Spaniard with a heavy accent, spat into the comm, "Tell your masters humanity doesn't surrender its own." Then he cut the channel and rammed full throttle. Before the frigate could obliterate him, the rest of the fleet arrived. DAS's modified lasers burning bright, Kowalski boarding with wild laughter, and Morgan coordinating strikes with surgical precision. The Syndicate frigate retreated in disgrace, leaving the Matador battered but alive. That night, the fleet celebrated with recycled whiskey and Eli's quiet verses. The lesson was clear. Even their weakest link could not be broken without a fight. Still, the Syndicate tightened its grip. Intercepted transmissions reached Morgan's flagship. If humanity continued its march, Lieutenant Ruiz would be executed. On the bridge, silence fell after the message. Even Kowalski had no joke for it. "They want us afraid," Morgan said finally. Her voice carried the weight of steel. "They want us divided, but they don't understand who we are. We don't abandon our own." Her words rippled across the fleet, repeated ship by ship, until even the smallest tugboat echoed the oath. "We don't abandon our own." By the time they emerged from Vale, the fleet was more than a collection of ships. It was an identity, a symbol. But waiting ahead was a Syndicate fortress system, defended by capital ships larger than entire cities and orbital guns bristling with plasma. Against such force, even the most inspired improvisation might not be enough. On the eve of arrival, Morgan walked the Resolute's observation deck, watching the stars drift by. Das tinkered with his ever-growing collection of impossible gadgets. Eli scribbled words into his notebook. Kowalski polished his rifles, humming tunelessly. Each of them knew what waited. None flinched. Morgan let herself speak aloud, softly but with conviction. "We'll bring him home." And for the first time, she believed not only that they could, but that they must. The Syndicate fortress system shimmered like a trap in the void, orbiting the pale star Koreth. The station known as Ketri Prime bristled with weapons. Gun platforms drifted in precise lattices. Capital ships patrolled in unwavering lines, each one polished to gleaming intimidation. Against the symmetry, the human fleet looked like a pile of broken toys. Cargo haulers with welded armor, liners with uneven engine trails, gunboats held together with cable ties and prayer. The Syndicate commanders watched the humans enter the system with amused disdain. They expected hesitation or surrender, or perhaps a desperate plea for Ruiz's life. Instead, they received Captain Alia Morgan's calm voice broadcast across every channel. "Release our officer, and no blood need be shed. Refuse, and we will come for him." The reply was laughter, mocking, sharp, dismissive. Then the battle began. The first salvo shook the fleet. Syndicate plasma tore through the vacuum, incinerating a converted freighter before it had time to fire a shot. Dozens of voices cried out across the commnet, cut short in static. Morgan did not flinch. "Break formation," she ordered. "Now!" Other species fought in lines, disciplined and predictable. Humans did the opposite. The fleet exploded into chaos, ships darting at strange angles, some spiraling, others weaving in corkscrews that baffled targeting sensors. Dr. Kieran Dass's modifications came to life. Cargo haulers spewed reflective paint into the void, scattering sensors with dazzling false echoes. Miners' cutters fired concentrated beams at odd intervals, slicing away at syndicate shielding. Passenger liners ejected lifeboats rigged as kamikaze drones, zigzagging unpredictably before detonating against warship hulls. "This isn't strategy," one syndicate officer snarled as his cruiser's targeting system scrambled. "This is madness." "Exactly." On the bridge of the Resolute, Eli Park gripped the console, wide-eyed as the battle unfolded. They look like an orchestra," he whispered. "Chaotic, but each note belongs." "Don't romanticize it too much," Das muttered, fingers flying over controls. That note was a freighter exploding. Still, Eli cannot shake the awe. Other civilizations mastered control. Humans mastered unpredictability. And unpredictability was terrifying. Sergeant Brick Kowalski made unpredictability into an art form. His assault shuttle slammed into the hull of a syndicate destroyer with all the subtlety of a drunken rhino. Explosions sparked along the breach. Inside, armed with nothing but 2 rifles and enough grenades to start a small civil war, Kowalski carved a path through corridors of startled enemies. He laughed as plasma bolts singed past. "Room service," he shouted, kicking through a blast door. "Complimentary lead, with every stay." The syndicate fought with formation, cover, precision. Kowalski fought with sheer audacity. And to his own astonishment, he lived through it, planting demolition charges in the ship's core before exfiltrating with a jaunty salute. The destroyer blossomed into flame moments later. The fleet bled for every victory. Morgan directed them with surgical clarity, turning chaos into rhythm. Vanguard ships, arc left. Haulers, vent cargo and scatter. Kowalski, stay alive. Das. Already on it. Das interrupted, rerouting power to overstressed shields. Sparks showered the Resolute's bridge, but the ship endured. Eli opened comms to the syndicate mid-battle, broadcasting not pleased but defiance. "You cannot break us. You cannot predict us. Every ship you destroy becomes 10 stories retold on Earth, and every second you stall brings us closer to Ruiz. We are coming." His words spread beyond the battlefield. Alien species watching from afar heard the conviction. For the first time, they saw the humans not as naive upstarts, but as a force that refused to yield. The turning point came when a coded pulse broke through syndicate jamming. Ruiz. The signal was faint, piggybacking on station maintenance channels, but it was clear. 3 short bursts, then 2 long, then 1, an old Earth distress code. Das traced the source. "Ketheri Prime," he confirmed. "He's there." Morgan's eyes sharpened. "Then that's where we're going." She ordered the fleet into a wedge, plowing through fire with sheer determination. Casualties mounted. Ships cracked apart. Hulls vented into the void. But the Armada pressed forward. Every surviving vessel focused on the same impossible goal. As the Resolute closed in, the Syndicate unleashed its final defense. A capital dreadnought, dwarfing every human ship combined. Its plasma cannons lit the void, vaporizing 2 frigates in seconds. Despair rippled through the fleet. Even Morgan hesitated. Then Kowalski's voice crackled through comms, punctuated by laughter and gunfire. "Don't sweat the big guy, Cap. I've got a plan." "Please tell me it's not another suicide run," Morgan said. "Of course not. This time it's a group suicide run." Before she could protest, Kowalski coordinated a swarm of drone pods, half-broken mining craft, empty escape capsules, even lifeboats stripped of safety systems. Together, they flung themselves at the dreadnought's shields, overloading its defenses in a blinding storm of small impacts. It wasn't enough to destroy the monster, but it tore open a window. The Resolute surged through, engine screaming. Das slammed every reserve into propulsion, systems groaning under the strain. "If this doesn't kill us," he shouted, "I want it noted that I was a genius." Morgan gave the final command. Boarding teams, prepare to retrieve Lieutenant Ruiz. Inside Kethri Prime, Ruiz heard the alarms, the tremors of explosions, the sudden falter of Syndicate confidence. For days he had been mocked, told his people would never come. Now the walls shook with proof. A guard snarled at him through the bars. They are dying out there for one man. It is meaningless. Ruiz grinned despite the bruises on his face. You really don't get it, do you? That's exactly why they'll win. Back on the Resolute, Morgan stood at the viewport as the fortress loomed larger, its defenses cracking under relentless human ingenuity. Her crew, exhausted and bloodied, held their posts with unyielding focus. They were close now. Ruiz was within reach. But the Syndicate, desperate and furious, prepared to detonate charges within the fortress itself, willing to sacrifice everything rather than surrender their hostage. Morgan's jaw tightened. She knew the next move would decide not only Ruiz's fate, but humanity's place in the galaxy. Bring us in, she ordered. The Resolute plunged toward the fortress, engines burning like fire against the dark. The Resolute slammed into Kethri Prime's outer docking ring with a grinding shriek of metal. Sparks sprayed like fireworks. The Syndicate fortress trembled under the assault, alarms echoing through its vast corridors. Docking clamps engaged, Das announced, voice tight as his console smoked. Don't ask how long they'll hold. They weren't designed for, well, any of this. Then we don't waste time, Captain Alia Morgan replied. Her tone was calm, but her eyes betrayed urgency. Strike teams, move. Ruiz is here and the Syndicate knows it's losing. Kowalski led the boarding party. As naturally as fire consumes oxygen, rifle in hand, explosive slung across his chest, he stormed through the breach with a roar that drowned out gunfire. Surprise, tentacle heads, he shouted, spraying plasma bolts down a corridor packed with defenders. His squad followed, hearts pounding but emboldened by his sheer lunacy. Eli parked trail behind, not with a rifle, but with a communicator and words prepared. He was no soldier, but he had insisted on coming. If Ruiz is alive, he deserves to hear a human voice before the bullets find him, he had told Morgan. Morgan herself remained on the Resolute, directing every squad, every ship in orbit, her voice steady as steel. If the fortress collapsed, her fleet needed order. Humanity's chaos required a conductor. The corridors of Kethri Prime were a labyrinth of smoke, alien architecture, and Syndicate desperation. DAS's improvised scanners guided Kowalski's team through service tunnels and maintenance shafts. The engineer's voice crackled through comms, hurried but precise. Left at the junction, then down 2 levels. Don't take the main corridor. It's rigged with plasma mines. I can't disarm them remotely, but I did manage to overload the gravity plating in Sector 7. Should make things interesting. Moments later, Syndicate guards floated helplessly mid-corridor as Kowalski's squad drifted through, laughing and firing. Nice touch, Doc. Kowalski hooped. 0G shootouts are way more fun. Please don't thank me, Das muttered. That's not what I designed it for. In the cell block, Ruiz heard the thunder of battle drawing closer. His bruised ribs ached with every vibration. He pressed against the cold bars, heart pounding with reckless hope. The door blew inward. Smoke filled the chamber. Out of the haze stepped Kowalski, helmet visor cracked but grin intact. Lieutenant, he said, tossing Ruiz a sidearm. We're here to pick up one very important pain in the ass. Ruiz caught the weapon, eyes wet. Took you long enough. You owe us gas money. Kowalski shot back. Behind him, Eli stepped forward, voice unshaken. The galaxy is watching Ruiz. Let's show them what one human life means. The extraction was chaos. Syndicate reinforcements poured in from all sides. Explosions rattled the bulkheads. Morgan's voice rang through comms. Teams, fall back to the breach. Fleet is covering your exit. But the Syndicate had one last card. The fortress core was rigged with self-destruct charges. A desperate attempt to deny victory, even if it meant obliterating themselves. DAS's hands flew across the controls aboard the Resolute. I can stall the detonation. Maybe, for a few minutes, but you'll have to run. Do it, Morgan ordered. Kowalski's team sprinted through collapsing corridors, Ruiz leaning on two soldiers as they fired backward. Das's voice counted down in their ears. 3 minutes to 45 to 30. Outside, the battle raged. The human fleet, battered and broken, fought like wolves cornered. Ships already venting atmosphere rammed into Syndicate cruisers. Freighters with failing engines locked tractor beams and dragged enemy ships into orbital gunfire. The junkyard fleet had become a storm, and it was tearing the fortress apart piece by piece. "Every second counts," Morgan murmured, watching the chaos unfold. She knew many wouldn't survive the day, but she also knew none of them would have chosen differently. At the breach, Kowalski shoved Ruiz through first. "Go. You're the reason we're here. Don't make it a waste." Ruiz refused to leave without him. "You're not dying here, Brick." Kowalski smirked, firing one last volley before leaping to the docking ring as detonations roared behind him. "Then buy me a drink when this is over." Das cut the clamps the instant they cleared. The Resolute tore free from Kethri Prime as the fortress blossomed into a fireball, shockwaves rolling across the void. The dreadnought still lingered, crippled but not destroyed. Its plasma cannons charged one last time, desperate to take the Resolute with it. Morgan stood firm. All batteries, fire. Every human ship that could still move emptied its weapons in a blazing volley. Mining lasers, improvised cannons, missile racks, even railguns built from decommissioned maglev trains. All focused on the dreadnought. The giant cracked, burned, and finally split in two, a carcass drifting lifeless through space. Silence. The battlefield smoldered. Wreckage spun slowly in the void, lit by dying embers of fire. The human fleet, what was left of it, floated scarred but unbroken. On the Resolute's bridge, Ruiz stood beside Morgan. His uniform was tattered, his body bruised, but his spirit intact. "You really brought all this for me?" he asked, voice quiet. Morgan met his gaze without flinching. "Not for you. For us. For the promise that no human is ever alone out here." Kowalski clapped Ruiz on the shoulder. "Also for the glory. Don't let her downplay it." Ruiz laughed, choked but genuine. Eli stepped forward, eyes shining. "The galaxy will never see us the same way again. They thought us weak. Now they'll know we are inevitable." Back on Earth weeks later, as survivors limp home, the story spread faster than light. 100 ships had sailed into the jaws of death for one man. Barely half returned. But they had returned with Ruiz, and with a message burned into the galaxy's memory. Humanity does not abandon its own. Some species called it madness. Others called it bravery. A few whispered it was the beginning of something greater. On the Resolute's final approach to Earth, Ruiz leaned against the viewport, gazing at the blue planet. "All this for one guy," he said again, half in disbelief. Kowalski grinned. "Nah, all this because we're human." Morgan said nothing, but her eyes softened. Das crunched another sunflower seed. Eli scribbled a final verse in his notebook, words that would echo long after the scars of battle faded. "We were not built to be neat, nor to be perfect. We were built to be impossible. And impossible, it seems, is what the galaxy now fears." The Resolute descended, and the galaxy held its breath.